Hi guys, my name is Kirsty and welcome back to Upside Down Books. Today we're going to be talking about The Wolf Den by Elodie Harper because I loved this book.
Non più tra I farfalloni amoroso, notte giorno di torno.
I think that The Wolf Den is probably going to be one of my favourite reads in 2022. I just thoroughly enjoyed the reading experience of this one. First things first is that how gorgeous is the book cover for this one. I have just been so excited to pick this one up because from the moment that I saw this cover, I was really intrigued by it and I wanted to pick it up, and it actually took me so long to get my hands on a copy of this book. And I don't know why. I was searching for months and months and months in every bookstore I went into to try and find The Wolf Den, and I could only find the sequel, which is The House with the Golden Door, or something similar. But I finally managed to get my hands on a copy of this, and I am so glad that I did. So, what's it about? So this is historical fiction, and it is basically, I'm going to say, firmly in the basket of feminist historical fiction. It's set in Pompeii, it is from one point of view, and it is set more specifically in a brothel. I think the first thing that drew me in about the blurb was the fact that this is set in Pompeii, as we all know is a city which no longer exists because of Mount Vesuvius erupting and all that jazz. But this is set well before the time of the volcano erupting. It is just using Pompeii as sort of an interesting and intriguing setting, and I have to say it is the first time that I have ever read historical fiction that has set the story in a place that has since been destroyed, and I find that that alone adds this extra layer of tension to the story, not because it has anything to do with the story itself, but just because you know that at some point in the future there are bad tidings. It's just like there's bad vibes hanging around the setting, which makes things more tense. And I don't know why, maybe that's just me, but I felt that way. So this follows a character called Amara, and that is not her real name because she is sold into the sex slave trade and is forced to work in a brothel after her family falls upon hard times. And it is a long story that you will find out as you read the book as to the exact hows, whens and whys she has ended up in the sex slave trade, and it is just so interesting because of the way that Amara and all the other girls working in the brothel, which is called the Wolf Den, interact and basically cope with their situation that they are in. I think this makes for such an intriguing and like perfect sort of setting to explore these issues of historical feminine struggles and plights, but also things that are definitely still relevant today. The main character is really smart and she's really resourceful, and she is under the control of the brothel owner, who is quite nefarious in the things he does and what he's willing to do to get what he wants. So it becomes this really enjoyable battle of wits as she tries to, first of all, comprehend and come to terms with the situation she's in, and second of all, try and find lots of clever ways to better her situation without getting herself killed. It's one of those really interesting situations where, because she is basically a possession of the brothel owner, she can't really own anything herself and she doesn't really have any nice rooms. The women, there's about 6 of them who are in the Wolf Den, all sleep in the cells in which they also sell their bodies, and so it's just like there's no privacy, there's no nothing, they don't get to keep like hardly any of their money. All of their proceedings go towards the brothel and the brothel owner, and they have certain quotas that they're expected to meet. There are loads of interesting things that are explored in this one, but I think the themes of friendship and the feminine plight were things that came across really strongly for me. From what I know about Elodie Harper is she is a journalist and TV presenter or reporter, and she has studied at Oxford, and I want to hedge my bets and say that she is British, but I'm not entirely sure if she just studied and worked in England, so I'm not sure, but I am so excited to see what else she writes off the back of this. This is going to be a trilogy, so as I mentioned before, we have book 1, The Wolf Den, book 2 is The House with the Golden Door, which I already have a copy of, and I'm so excited to read and find out what happens next, and we are waiting on book 3, and I am just expecting it to be good times. The books themselves are just absolutely stunning, and I have since found out that both Waterstones and Goldsborough did special editions of the Wolf Den and of the Golden Door, the House with the Golden Door, which would have been so amazing to have, but those are sold out now. Nonetheless, these books are just so beautiful to look at. My favourite things in this book would have to be the way that the girls relate to each other, the women relate to each other. I found Amara to be such a complex and interesting character because she's very likable, but she is also willing to do what it takes to get where she needs to be, and they're sort of taught and fraught friendships that happen within the brothel, because if she's perceived to be bettering herself and not bringing up everyone with her and that kind of thing, there's like undertones of jealousy and rivalry going on, and the way that she's able to sort of put on a really thick skin and put herself first and maybe a select few friends, I thought was a really, really fascinating look at a female mindset and what a woman will do in times that are hard. I feel like Elodie Harper really captured that sort of desperate situation really well, and it's such easy reading. This is like, I flew through this. This was such an easy read. I read it within a week and it was so hard to put down. The font's really big inside, so it's like quite literally easier to read some other historical fiction. And it's not so much focused on the history itself, it is very much so focused on the characters. It's a very character-driven story, and so it's something that people who don't necessarily always read historical fiction might enjoy. It's something that I cannot stop recommending to absolutely everybody. And I think the interesting things that happen within the plot are just drive the story forward so well. There are lots of peaks and troughs in terms of high tension, low tension, serious action. We've got like tragedies happening as well as really joyous moments. We have an array of characters that are introduced, but it's not in an overly complicated way. You obviously get quite a specific look at the women who are in the brothel themselves, and there are other characters on the fringe as well that all have their part to play, and I just found it to be really interesting. It was also really interesting looking at the way that the community itself works together and sort of the secrets that are kept, particularly in the context of a brothel. Honestly, just everything is like multi-layered here, because the women obviously know all of the men in the town and all of the women and slash wives that they are cheating on, so there's that extra layer of like the brothel women holding such secrets and such a weight upon their shoulders in that sense as well. There's loads of beautiful moments of the women standing up for each other, whether that's to do with women not wanting to take certain clients or banding together to try and offer themselves some sort of protection. That was a really strong theme, the idea of like how to keep yourself safe as a woman, particularly if you're a desirable object with limited rights. That was all done really well as well. Now, the one thing I did want to talk about is when it comes to sex scenes and what kind of level of explicitness we are talking about in this book. It's actually quite mild. There obviously are sex scenes, but I found a lot of them to be quite comical, and like comical for a very specific reason. It is obviously set in a brothel, and it is obviously centered around the fact that these women are forced to sell their bodies, but none of the sex scenes felt crass or poorly written. They were all very much so written with the idea of almost the women making a mockery of the men and how easy they were to please and how easy they were to fool. You could always get that understanding that the women were really layering it on thick, and there's so many comments as they're like, surely they wouldn't believe that. Surely the men wouldn't believe that this was genuine and that they were actually an object of desire, but they always do, and it's just sort of that absolute not disbelief, but just exasperation from the women that the men have so much power over them, but are also so gullible and like almost stupid in a way that the women can pity them for. I loved that complexity and the interplay of that power play, I guess, because you've got so much power with the men and so little power with the women. When it comes to different contexts and settings, such as in brothels or places like that, the power the women have over manipulation and the ability to get what they want is tenfold of that which the male characters could have. So this is not a sexy story, this is not a romance, and this is not just a little look into history. This is very much so a commentary on the power of women, the importance of women, and the role of women, and it is done in such an interesting and intriguing setting. It had me laughing, it had me crying, it has me desperate to know what happens next, because it leaves not quite on a cliffhanger, but certainly on a big question mark. I would certainly recommend this to anyone who has read Circe by Madeline Miller, and probably her other books too, but Circe is the main book that comes to mind, and not just because of the similar setting, but of the way that women are portrayed and sort of the power play of Circe in that novel. So if you really enjoyed that, then I can't recommend this one enough. It also has interesting commentary on race relations, because Amara is Greek, but she is obviously in the Roman Empire, and so it has that interesting it's got so many interesting things. Let's talk about more of that. So it's got the difference between anyone who's not Roman and those that are, and the way that they are treated as objects or lesser things because they are not from that country. That is interesting and highly relevant. You've also got commentary on age, particularly in terms of the women in the brothel. One of them is older and has had a son who is also in the same brothel, and he is very embittered because of the life that he's been born into. So it's a really interesting commentary on the value of a woman going down as their age goes up. That was really interesting. And there's also really interesting themes around pregnancy and basically your basic human rights. I will say there are some trigger warnings that are worth mentioning. There is suicide, there is death/murder, there's alcoholism, there's terminated pregnancies, and in general pregnancy does crop up in this book as well, particularly because the women are not allowed to keep the children, and so the rule of thumb is that the child would be left out and exposed until it dies. So there's some pretty serious themes going on in the book, and that is worth noting if that's not your thing, or if you're not currently in a position to read this kind of book. But if that is something you're interested in, then I really think that Elodie Harper has done a magnificent job in tying this book together. It's just done so well. Obviously this was a 5-star read for me, and I can't wait to continue the series and read everything else that she publishes because I genuinely just love this so much, and it is absolutely going into my all-time favourites list of books that I have read and loved. So that is everything from me today. I hope you enjoyed this book too if you have read it, and I wish you all the best of times if you have it up and coming on your to-be-read list. So let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this book if you've read it, but other than that I will see you in my next video. Goodbye.
Alla gloria mia.